Hey everybody and welcome to this video. Have you ever wondered how you can get your models from a 3D package like Blender over into Godot game engine? Well, you're in the right place. Got you covered here because we're going to actually be exporting a model that not only is a model, but it also has textures on it, it has materials on it, and it has animations split into 3 separate actions. And we can do quite a deep dive in the next 15 minutes or so. So, what do we need to do? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we've got a way of exporting to Godot. Now, unfortunately, Godot doesn't support an industry standard that a lot of you may be used to, an FBX file. We need to export it into one of other 3 types. An OBJ, something else that slips my mind at the moment, or a DAE. Now, OBJ will not support animation, so that's out straight away. The other one does, but it's still new and upcoming, so we're going to stick with a mature format that's the most supporting. That's a DAE, or Collada file. But Blender itself, even though it comes with a Collada exporter, it's not suitable for the purposes that we want to do. So we're going to have to get a new one. So let's go and do that now. Okay, so let's start now with the first step that we need to do. We need to go ahead over to GitHub and go get the appropriate bit of software. So I've already got that open on a tab here. I shall drag it across. If you search on Google for better Collada exporter, and we can probably see it's already come up there. We do a Google search for it. github.com, Godot engine, Collada exporter. So if we go to this here, if we go to the clone or download button on the right hand side, and I'm just going to download the zip. If you know how to use source control, you can copy that and open it up. But for us mere mortals, we can download the zip. Once we open that up, we've got to do a couple of things. I'm going to extract this. As you can see, I've already downloaded it. So I'm just going to go into my downloads. And we can see the file is here and ready to go. Now, this folder itself, if we go into it, it's got another Collada exporter. And inside that, we've got IOScene DAE. Now, this whole folder we need to copy into the Blender directory. Now this will vary from machine to machine in the version of Blender you've got, but I'm going to copy it now. I'm going to right click on it and copy. Here we go. Now I'm going to go find Blender. Now on a typical Windows installation, it will be on your C drive, under Program Files, under Blender Foundation, Blender, and if I scroll down, 2.79. Now, if you're watching this later on, this version may be different, but if we go ahead and open up 2.79, go into the scripts folder, go into the add-ons folder, and finally without. You'll see these other IOs in here already. Now, because I've already installed it, if we scroll down, we will find that we have, there it is, ioscene._DAE. Okay, so I know there's going to be a few Mac users as well, so make sure you go to Finder, go to your Applications, find your Blender folder and double click it. You'll need to right click or secondary click on the Blender icon and show package contents. And now comes the interesting part. We have to go to Contents, Resources, 2.79, Scripts, and add-ons. And just let me show you all of this in here. Now, this is where you're going to be placing that folder. Now, the other way of showing this, as you can see along the bottom, there is the path as well that you would choose to use. If I just switch the view slightly so that we can see the entire folder structure, you can see it is quite nested. So on the Mac, it is slightly different. You have to delve into the package itself and then copy it across. You may need to type in some usernames and passwords, both on Mac and PC. Right, back to checking it in Blender. Perfect, so that's in Blender now, and it will come up when we search for our add-on. So let's go and make sure that is working. So I'm going to go ahead, open up Blender, and once it's opened up, we can go to File, User Preferences. Once we're in User Preferences, you can see that I've already done this here, but you'll need to make sure you're on your Add-ons tab at the top. Now, I like to search for things with the little search box over on the left-hand side. We can type in Better, and we find the Better Collada Export. Now, if you make sure you've got a tick in that box there, there's one final thing to do. It is optional, but if you save your user settings down in the lower left, what you will find is that now this add-on that we've added into Blender will be available all the time. The final thing to do here is just to make sure it is working by going to File, Export, and at the bottom here we got Better Collada. So that's great, we're ready to go. let's go explore what export options we actually have. So obviously you get to pick where you want to export. I'm going to expand this open so we can have a look at the export DAE settings. Now, operator presets, there are no presets at the moment. Feel free to create your own as you go. Now, when exporting, it gives you a series of Blender objects that you can export. Now, typically you will probably want mesh, armature. Now you may want empties for control, you may want curves for a path that you've laid down, and camera and lamp, you can export those as well. And the great thing is Godot knows how to interpret those, which means that in a moment, if we export the camera and lamp in our scene, in Godot, we will have lighting and a camera set up, so we can just pretty much preview as we go. Now, I want all of these back on for the moment, so I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag my mouse cursor over them. And there we go, whilst clicking the left mouse button. Now, let's run down all of these, because there's an awful lot of options here. Just briefly, some of them are self-explanatory. Selected objects, well, that depends on your scene. If you only want to export a certain number of objects from your scene, do use selected objects, and then you can export only those. I tend to find using selected objects I usually miss one or two, so don't get too frustrated if you do that. Apply your modifiers. Now, what we can see in front of us here is the default settings. So you'll notice selected objects is turned off. That's fine. Usually you want to export, like if you've generated a character like we'll have a look at in a moment, you'll find that when you export things, you probably want to export just the one thing from it. Now, if you'd already created a big scene over in Blender, you might want more. Applying modifiers. Now, you generally wouldn't want to do this because, let's say you've got a subdivision surface modifier on your model, you export it, you may have exported a boatload of geometry accidentally. Now, the exclude armature modifier, we will see in a bit that that's on by default, because if you tick apply the modifiers, you would have applied your armature modifier. Now, if you've got an animation, a skeletal rig, a rig-based animation, bone-based animation, whatever you want to call it, you would have ruined your animation states if you had that unchecked. Tangent arrays, that's all to do with exporting normals. Now, in general, you'd have probably created your normal map or using a separate normal map, so that's off. Triangulation. Now, in general, triangulation is not something that we really need to worry about these days, but there are some times when you do need to worry about it. And if you did need to worry about it, I'd rather do it more explicitly within Blender itself, rather than letting this export feature triangulate as it wants to. Copy images. Now, that is something I would typically have turned on. And that means that the textures assigned to my materials within Blender will also export. That's crucial. Now, I will turn that off if the model I'm exporting shares textures with other models as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up with duplication within Godot, or any other game engine for that matter, and that's never a good thing. You lose control, it's a bad workflow. Active layers. I will use this. It means that the things that I can see on the screen, I tend to separate my scene out into main characters, lighting and camera, any control bones, all on a separate layer. So it won't export things that I don't want it to. Exclude control bones. Now, this one, I've just said control bones, but this literally means, in this case, anything marked with a prefix, CTRL, or are not marked as deformed bones when you're creating your rig. Export animation. Now, we're going to need this turned on in our case, in our example in a moment, and the same with all actions, because our animations are stored as actions rather than just on the timeline. Skip no expression animations. Now, I don't tend to use this feature at all. Entirely up to you. It's there. And if you're going for more for a workflow with Godot, you may want to incorporate this for not exporting some test animations or prototypes that you're working on. That's always a good way of viewing that. Optimize keyframes. Now, again, hopefully you haven't got any double keyframes, but by optimizing them, unless you're having a problem, that's a great way forward. Shape keys. Now, if you've got any shape keys, and you'll know you have shape keys if you're doing this, I don't in the animation I'm about to do, so I won't have that ticked. And precision. Now, strangely enough, precision is to do with the optimizing of the keyframes. It's just a bit further down. If we hover over the tooltip here, says the tolerance for comparing the double keyframes. So we don't want them seeing things that are different, but too similar, and matching them up and then ruining our animation. So that's a brief overview of what all of these, well, there's so many options, what they all mean. Now let's have a look at them in reality. Now I need to go find myself one of my characters. So I'm going to come out of there and I'm going to go to open recent because I've already got a file ready to go. Now this is a little guy that we've been making over on the Blender course, the Blender Character Creator course, and if I just press play you can see he's got a couple of different animation states. Now if we go down to the actions on the lower part of the screen here, you'll notice that this is walk dash loop. Now I'll come back to the dash loop later on, that will be important. Now if we have a look, there's a bouncy walk, which is the one he's doing at the moment, and also a subtle walk, which is much more gentle. Now, in terms of exporting those, we now see that we've got some actions. We can see that he is in fact textured. And if we have a look at the mesh data itself, if I drill in here and go to our material, we see that we've got a material called Cube Dude, and that has a texture assigned to it. It's just the one texture covering the entire of our model, which means he's UV unwrapped as well. Okay, so we don't need to dive too much into our scene that we have in front of us here. Suffice to say that we have our character and his rig on layer 1. We have lighting and camera set up on layer 2, and there's some other stuff way on layer 20. So, layer 1 and 2, I'm going to hold down shift to select the second layer as well. I want to export the camera and lights so I don't have to go and set up things in Godot as well. Okay, so I think we're ready to do a test export. So with everything I've said so far, let's put that into action. So we're going to export Better Collada, and in this case, do I want selected objects? No, I'm doing it by layer, so we're going to do active layers. That is ticked. Exclude the armature modifier. Well, we're not applying modifiers, so that's redundant anyway. We can skip over a tangent arrays triangulate, but I am going to copy images just so I've got my image. Yes, I know it's in 2 places because of what I'm working on here, but it does mean in this example I can stick it in my Godot project folder, and so it's just all self-contained, so it's nice, just nice and neat for this tutorial. And of course, when you're dealing with your own stuff, you'll have your own storage paradigm that you'll be working to anyway. Active layers, yes. Exclude control bones. I'm going to leave that on. We do want to export animation, otherwise we're not going to see anything. And all actions. If we miss this all actions, because I've made, let's just cancel this for a second and come out. Because I've made actions, individual actions to change how this guy is moving. I need to select the armature before changing the actions, otherwise it won't work. But because I've set it up as actions, what would happen if I only exported and under Better Collada and only had this export animation ticked? Whatever the current active animation was would be the one that would be exported. I want all actions. I'm going to optimize my keyframes, and I don't care about shape keys. I really don't. Now, I'm going to make a folder on my desktop. So desktop's not got any folders on it at the moment, and I'm going to call this Cube Dude DAE. And I'm going to go into that folder ready to store. Now, because I've got copy images, when I go ahead and export, there we go, it's done. Now, a warning about exporting, it doesn't warn you if you're about to overwrite something. So that is critical. I have accidentally overwritten projects before. So let's get rid of that and let's go to our desktop, Cube Dude DAE. And you'll notice that we've got the DAE, the Collada file, and we've got the images folder with an image in it. Now, what we can do here is a couple of things. We can drag and drop both of these items into Godot in a moment, or we can drag them in manually and then manage them in Godot later on. Let's just start. Where did I put Godot? I haven't put Godot somewhere sensible, have I? I think there it is. So let's open up Godot nice and quick. Now, I've already done this project before as a test run and for the blog, the guide that's been written. So let's set up a new project here, and I'm going to call this testing DAE import. It doesn't really matter what you guys call it if you're following along. And I'm going to create a folder here, create and edit. Now, this is going to have created a folder on my drive. If I go back to my documents, down here called testing DAE import. Now, in this case, I can drag the desktop folder, this CubeDude DAE. I could drag that into that folder if I wanted to, and that is the way I'm going to do this at the moment. I've almost forgotten where I put it. Here we go. Testing DAE import. So he's in there. As soon as we go back over here, it's imported it into its own folder. Now the issue, and why I've done that, the issue is that I can't just drag a folder across. If I drag a folder in, it generally, well, is it going to let me do that now? That would be amazing if it did. But when I've been testing, it didn't allow me to do that. So if we go into that folder, you'll see that we've got a folder called images and we've got CubeDude DAE. Now to speed things along so we can just get going, I'm going to double click on my DAE file and new inherited. Boom, he's in straight away. Now the great thing here is he's actually come across with all his materials attached. Hooray! This didn't happen when I tried it before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that this hasn't happened for you and just show you how to set everything up. So on the right hand side here, we have a CubeDude mesh in this case, a CubeDube apparently, I've mistyped somewhere, but there we go. So CubeDude, and if we select that, if we go down and look at the inspector, we can see that he has a material applied to him. Oh, he doesn't have a material applied to him, so I'm really shocked as to why he looks like that at all, but there we go. So let's drag our material across and into this little area here that says null. Now you do have to be quite precise. As you can see, if it goes either side, it just doesn't allow you to do it, and you can't drag it onto the model either. If you're listening, Godot, that would be great if you could sort that out. Now, occasionally that won't work either. We've been explicit here. We're saying, you know, put this material on there. If we then go into the material by double clicking it and having a look at the inspector, what we need to do is under the albedo, which is the base surface, we can see it's already got a texture applied. If it hadn't, we could go to our images and literally drag and again into a box here, and it will overwrite it. Now, of course, we could copy any texture into there. This one is specific to this model, so we'll leave it like that. Hurrah! So CubeDude is in, and he's looking pretty good. Let's just press play to see what our scene is looking like. It says it's never been saved, so I'll just go along and click save for the moment. It'll take a few seconds, and there we go. He's just stood there. So what about those animations? Let's check that out now. So I'm going to close down the game running for the moment. You can hit F5, by the way, if you want to. And is it going to run? Yeah, there we go. So you can press F5 to quickly run, and I'll do that next time. So let's have a look at the animation data. If we have a look on the right-hand side again, down at the bottom of this list, this hierarchy, we have animation player. If we click on that, the bottom changes, and we can see that we've got our animation data. And if we go ahead and press play, we will see that the animation starts playing and it stops. Okay, so in the lower right of this animation area, there is a loop animation icon. And if we go ahead and click that and press play, we will see it looping over and over again. So that's great for previewing. Now we'll also notice here we've got bouncy walk, subtle walk, and walk loop. And we can switch between them. So we're going to have to go ahead and click the loop button again to watch that preview. Press play again. Excellent. So that is looping round as well. Now, if we go down to our walk loop, we don't need to do that. Why? Well, this suffix that we've got on the end, the dash loop, has automatically enabled looping. Interesting. So if I go back to bouncy walk for the moment. No, let's go back to subtle walk, because bouncy walk and walk loop look exactly the same. Bad naming. Slap on my wrists for bad naming there. So subtle walk, we've got that playing at the moment. Let's go ahead. I'm going to hit F5 and load up our scene. And he stood still there and not working. We've missed something. What have we missed? Well, along this top header bar here on the animation, there is an autoplay on load, just at the very end here. So if we click that and then press play, we will find it will open up. There we go. Oh. And it just stops. Right. Now, if you don't have this suffix, the dash loop at the end, so if we go to walk loop now, which is this kind of bouncy walk, and do exactly the same, pressing play, we will find that it will loop over and over again. Providing we go auto play on load. Almost forgot to do it on that one there. Now he will just loop over and over again. So that's another reason to do it. In order to get the other animations to loop, we are going to either have to put -loop on the end of them, or we're going to have to write that into our scripts itself. So there we go. We've got a Cube Dude over into his new home over in Godot, and I think he really likes it there. Look at him strut his stuff. And there we go, Cube Dude is in his new home and he looks super comfortable. Thank you for staying with me on this journey as we've gone through. If you like what you've seen, remember to hit the like button. If you've got any comments or questions, do put them down in the comments below. Love to see your suggestions as well if you have them. As you probably gathered, we've been talking a lot about Godot, and we're actually running a Kickstarter at the moment. So if you're seeing this in, it's coming up to the beginning of June, we've got about 2 weeks. If you're seeing this now, why don't you come and check out our Kickstarter if you'd like to have a more structured learning journey when it comes to Godot and see much more information like you've seen here. Incidentally, I'm Michael Bridges, part of the game dev team. Come and check us out on Udemy as well. I'll stick a link in the description below so you can check out our other courses that we do if you'd like to learn in a more structured manner. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next video.